Welcome to For the Love of Rugby. Now, Joe Schmidt and Andy Farrell have both named their team ahead of Saturday's clash for the second test at the MCG.
Bundee, Andrew Porter and Big Red Ollie Chessum have made the Lions starting 15, which includes 9 Irishmen.
On the bench, James Ryan is a test Lion.
Jac Morgan means we now have a Welshman in the squad.
Owen Farrell completes an incredible month by being involved in the Matchday 23 another time for the Lions.
And Blair Kinghorn completes the bench after a great outing against the FMP in midweek.
Before we get into the episode, please like and subscribe. We are trying to get to 50k subscriptions by the end of the Lions.
Right, Ben, teams are out. Should we start with Australia?
Yeah, let's delve into Australia straight away. Let's get into it, Coley.
Joe Smith's only made 3 changes, all in the forward pack. Dave Porecki comes in at hooker, as expected. Will Skelton and Rob Valetini come into the second row and at 6, respectively. What are your initial thoughts on the Australia team?
My initial thoughts is no surprise to see Valetini and Will Skelton back in there. Obviously, shaking off their injuries will bolster the size, the carry power. You looked at Australia on Saturday and, are they going to change too much what they do in style? Maybe a little bit of tinkering, but a lot of what they did was trying to sort of carry around the 9, off the 9, around the ruck and try and sort of dent the lines there, almost tighten them up before releasing to the back line. Skelton will give them a lot more carry, as will Valetini. So those guys will bring a lot more punch, a lot more carry for Australia, because for large parts, Lions sort of dominated the collisions, where those guys are 2 guys that can definitely win collisions, get Australia on the front foot. I'm surprised, if anything, Coley. So those guys coming in, it doesn't surprise me at all. I think most international teams would welcome those 2 guys. I think they're terrific players and big humans that, like I say, are going to give Australia some dent where they lacked a lot of dent at the weekend. I am surprised that there wasn't more tinkering in the back line, if I'm honest. The back line is exactly the same. He's backed it again. From a half-back's point of view, if that's you, that's always nice. It's reassuring when a coach backs you again, even if maybe things haven't gone quite well. But it shows to me, Coley, that the fact they haven't gone with Tate McDermott at 9, who I think has been really impressive, who's a lively 9, sniping 9, brings a lot of tempo and fluidity to the Australian attack. He also, of course, plays with Tom Liner at the Reds, so those guys got their sort of understanding already and cohesion. They're gone with Jake Gordon again, so that says to me that they're going to still stick to a bit more of a structured kicking game, go to the air a lot, try and play that structured game model. Through doing that, then sort of try and win the scraps, win the air. If they win that, then sort of use those power forwards and sort of eke out penalties. That's sort of Joe Schmidt sort of style. So Tom Liner gets the nod again. Let's see how he goes. I think the Lions will definitely be happy seeing that back line go again, mate, because I think they'll be looking at that and thinking they can target that. Like I look at the 9 and 10 combo, they can really try and disrupt that once again this weekend.
Yeah, I look at the fact that there's no change in the back line, and it makes me think that last week Australia thought maybe they got the tactics right, but the forwards didn't give them a platform in regards to the power game, the carry, the set piece that they needed to sort of the backs to really come to life. And the fact you've made 3 changes, yes, okay, you got 2 of those which are dead set certs, if you see what I mean, Skelton and Valetini, but it kind of like it's interesting the back line hasn't changed. So yeah, it's obviously great for those guys in the back line to be backed. Puts a bit more pressure on the forward pack to sort of be like to win those physical battles and actually win the game for Australia and let the backs then play. But yeah, it's a interesting selection. It's almost one of those ones where it's kind of like how do I put it? Like not. They obviously, Joe Schmidt and obviously the coaches know what's going on in the Australia camp, so therefore they know who's in form, who's training well, who's adding to the environment, which is all the stuff we don't see. So there's a reason they've been picked, and it's almost like this week is the sort of like they got it right. Maybe the selection they got it right last week, but this week is more cohesive and with a forward pack that might be able to win some collisions with the bigger guys. That back line's the one to back, and they got it right last week. If you see what I mean, it's one of those sort of in my head without knowing the ins and outs, and just from the outside looking in and what you know about Test rugby, you kind of think, yeah, there's a reason it's gone again. There's a reason the same back line again.
Well, they've gone 6-2 as well, Coley, haven't they? So they're obviously looking to try and play that structured kicking game, and then almost use the forwards and obviously bring in fresh legs. That's the way they're trying to shape the game and do. Like, I was really surprised to see Angus Bell on the bench again. I think that I know that when you start looking at the fact that Valetini's starting, the fact that Skelton's starting, they've got ball carriers within that starting 8 as such. But he's a guy that I think is terrific, and I'm surprised that in a must-win game, why would you not pick one of your best loose heads, or certainly one of the best ball carrying loose heads in the world? Like, he really is. For people that don't know too much about him, he's a huge ball carrier in world rugby as a loose head. I'm surprised they haven't gone with him, mate, in a game that's such a must win. As I said, like, they're back the same back line. Does that show almost the lack of depth that Australia does have in the back line? Or does it, is like you just mentioned there, Coley, which is a really valid point, is it the fact that they felt that actually the backs largely got the structure and the game plan right? It was the forwards that didn't win the collisions to allow them to then execute the other areas they wanted to do.
Angus Bell might be on the bench because he will add carry with 20, 30 to go, whereas actually you might find someone like Skelton, pace drops off later in the game, and say as it opens up that Angus Bell might be someone to add. And, I say there's lots of things to consider, and that's, we obviously don't know it all, but yeah, it's very interesting, the Australia team. And some of it is kind of like, again, I did sort of read somewhere this week that, this Australia team might be prepping almost for the Rugby Championship, the way it's selecting its team and stuff like that. So just a thought.
Well, if that is the thought, then that's a sad thought, Coley. But it certainly looks non-reactional, does it? When I was looking at the game plan and what we saw last week from Australia and wanting so much more from them, and obviously only getting it for the last 12 minutes, there were some people that in that 12-minute spell Australia did have, and Lions definitely dropped off, that did play well. And you're thinking that they might force their way in ahead of this one. So I was surprised to see a lack of changes. I wasn't surprised to see those additions come in, because I think they would be great additions to anyone, any international team, when you're thinking of that calibre of Skelton and Valetini. So, yeah, interesting one. I think the half-backs, again, like I said, I think the Lions will be happy seeing that back line, and I think they'll be ready to exploit it once again. I think they'll be looking to get to 9 and 10, really try and disrupt their rhythm, really sort of highlight the fact they haven't played together more than once, and get after it, try and nullify Joseph Suaalii, make sure that he's got minimum touches in the game, and then aerially, with Potter, with Jorgensen on both wings, like inexperienced slightly, but looking to kick behind them, isolate them. Tom Wright's obviously a runner. So if anything, mate, I look at the selection, I think it plays into the Lions' hands. It does.
Speaking about the Lions, let's talk about them. Some interesting selections Andy Farrell has gone with. Centre-wise, Bundee starts. Now, I believe that Gary Ringrose is also due to start, but he pulled out at the end of the training on Wednesday, reporting concussion symptoms, which is obviously very sad for him. Very honest to him. A great, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think that should be rightly applauded. And so Hugh Jones comes in to start.
Yeah, let's talk about the centres, Coley. And you're exactly right in terms of Gary Ringrose. Very honest. What an example he is to anyone out there, to any youngster, male, female, playing junior rugby, playing senior rugby, local rugby, whatever it is. If you've got concussion symptoms, you must flag them up. Be totally honest and put yourself first in terms of your well-being, and also your team first, to making sure that, you're not putting them in jeopardy by going out there and not being right. So amazing sort of, when you think about the Lions, is the pinnacle for so many players. To think that he's on the cusp of playing, becoming a test line at the weekend, playing for in a must-win game at MCG, and all that hard work that he's done to aim to be part of that squad, to be a test starter, to then have the self-awareness, and flag that up, I think is a fantastic example to so many people. So I can't applaud him enough. Obviously, naturally, everyone would be gutted for him, like no more gutted than what himself, because I'm sure he's devastated. But what an example of an absolute role model there. So yes, so Gary Ringrose was due to start. So Hugh Jones comes back in. Now Hugh Jones, I think, has been in fine form anyway. Sione Tuipulotu has got a tight hamstring, by all accounts. So reading Andy Farrell's comments, he felt that they're very similar players anyway. In terms of what he wants from that 12 position. Those guys are almost very similar in his minds. They can both carry, they can both distribute, they can both hit the other side of the ball and things like that. So, Farrell's gone with Bundee. Sione Tuipulotu's obviously got a tight hamstring. Maybe that had maybe it was a tight call anyway. Maybe we spoke about it actually, Coley, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, where we wouldn't be surprised if, second test he went for an all-Irish centre combination, which he was due to do. I think the big question is that once Gary Ringrose made that decision, was he then tempted to put Sione Tuipulotu back at 12 to play them as a combo? But with a tight hamstring and everything like that, I think, you don't lose anything by putting Bundee in at 12, and you don't lose anything by putting Hugh Jones in for Gary Ringrose at 13. So that has always been the depth of the Lions centres has been absolutely key. Back three is an interesting one, Coley. And James Lowe, Tommy Freeman, and Hugo Keenan. And the way I say it's interesting is there was a lot of debate after the weekend about these guys and the back three and would there be changes. Now Mac Hansen, I believe, was once again ruled out for selection due to having a minor injury. And obviously the guys played some big minutes on Tuesday as well. So, there's no changes there, but I think that was the one. And then when you look at Blair Kinghorn, of course, he played on Tuesday night. There was a lot of chat whether he'd come in at fullback. He's now forced his way onto the bench. But in terms of the back line, the big talking point, of course, is the example that Gary Ringrose has done in terms of ruling himself out and Bundee coming in at 12. Other than that, it's exactly the same as it was last week. Gibson Park and Finn Russell can build on the partnership they've had, the experience that they have. And I thought, like I say, it was night and day between the halfback pairing that we saw for the Lions versus the halfback pairing on display against Australia last week. I expect those guys to really grab hold of the game once again on Saturday at the MCG, given the magnitude of it and given their vast experience and their high ability to perform. I'm expecting big games from Finn Russell and Gibson Park once again to really steer this Lions back line and the pack.
It definitely shows that Lions, you need depth. And I think, it's a smart move bringing out guys to play the midweek game. Just to say, because the tests can be incredibly attritional. I've spoken before about midweek, backing up midweek travel, game at the weekend, and it does take the toll on some of these bodies, especially at the end of a long domestic season as well. Do you think Aki and Jones feel a little bit untested going into obviously it's untested going into this test, but will Australia look to exploit that? Can they exploit that?
That's the one part where Australia might look at and think, well, they're a bit untested. Even 10, 12, 13 just defensively and their understanding of each other. Because, when you went with Russell, Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones, of course, they know each other in attack. Everyone often thinks about attack, but equally they know each other in terms of defence. How close to 12 need to stand next to 10 and 13 his width and, check and release. And what I mean by that is when you've got runners coming down your channel, like you check them, like you keep them on your inside shoulder. Once they haven't got it, you sort of swim off them and you release your next player and all these sort of things that you only learn from playing together week in, week out. So is it a bit untested? It is untested, absolutely. However, I think because Aki is very similar to Tuipulotu, and I think that was Farrell's point, that it doesn't feel as untested as maybe if you had a 12 that was a very different style, different type of 12, a very different style 12. So I don't fear it to be totally untested. I don't fear like the drop off to be huge. I think there was obviously going to be a little bit of synergy that maybe doesn't quite have the same flow as Tuipulotu at 12, Hugh Jones at 13, especially when you look at the shape that they run a lot, which was 9 to 12, 13 on a short ball, 10 out the back. Those Scottish partnerships run that extremely well. Now, Aki, of course, runs it. But like I say, that just being able to understand each other's timing and all those little cues isn't up to the same level as that. However, I still think that Coley, like Aki's a fine player. And I think that, that combination won't be exploited, put it that way. I certainly don't think it'll be exploited defensively. And I think that Aki will give them some great direction in attack in terms of his ball carrying ability. And he can whack as well.
Potentially one of the biggest headlines out of this team and this selection is Owen Farrell coming onto the bench. Obviously not selected originally. He's been on tour, sort of a bit controversially called up for Elliot Daly. We have always said, the controversy wasn't with us, put it that way. We've always said what a great player is, what a great leader, and how he adds to the team and adds to the team, adds to the environment, and his midweek performances have shown what he's done. Why do you think he's been picked on the bench ahead of Marcus Smith, who was covering sort of 10-15 last week? Why do you think, what's he offer that, say, a Marcus doesn't? Or is that a combination of Blair Kinghorn also being on the bench, so you got 15 covered?
Yeah, it's a combination of a couple of things, I think, Coley, is first and foremost, obviously, Aki comes in to start, who's on the bench last week. Tuipulotu's got a tight hamstring. So Marcus obviously played 10 and can cover fullback. You've got Blair Kinghorn, who can play, is obviously out and out fullback, can play wing as well. So you got the fullback stuff covered. You got the back three position covered with Blair Kinghorn being on the bench. And then Owen, of course, can play 10. Perfect. Or is a 10, rather. But but equally can play 12, and he's been used in the midfield. So Marcus can't cover that. His versatility, Marcus, is 10-15, but 15's already ticked off and covered. So it's an obvious choice of who goes in terms of being able to do the centre combination and also cover 10. So Owen slots in. I think Owen's been terrific since he's turned up on tour. I think, as you said, Coley, there was a lot of hoo-ha, a lot of debate about it. We've always seen the value in him and why you would take him. Terrific player, fantastic leader, added. And you know what he's done? He's gone in there and hasn't he just looked so assured and everything you'd expect him to be? So, the 2 games he has played, he's been very impressive. 1 off the bench and, of course, 1 starting. Very tidy in his game, some great decision-making. And rightly so, totally deserved of being in the matchday 23. So, like I say, I think when it came to the who'd you go with, Marcus and Owen, I think it all comes down to the fact that Owen can cover 12 as well. And given the centre situation with Ringrose pulling himself out with Tupolotu and with a tight hamstring, there's only one man for the job. And, I can see, can't you just see it now coming down to Saturday and Owen kicking the goal to win it? I'm not saying that I don't think it'll be that tight, but it would be great for him to go and do something like that. So it wouldn't surprise me, but brilliant to see him involved. And of course, Alex Mitchell as well, keeping that 21 shirt coming off and adding off the bench. But when I look at it, Coley, it seems an obvious choice to me, given the situation with the injuries and mixing and matching.
If he has to go on for Finn Russell at 10, obviously a different role, say Bundee at 12, we say he can cover 10, 12. Can he cover both of those? I mean, he's a big lump, covers the physicality of 12, got the playmaking ability of 10. Is it a seamless transition, into those covering both?
I think that the lines will look different if he goes in at 12. He doesn't have the carry power, of course, of Bundee and his ability to, win gain line and win collision. That's not sort of necessary. Owen can carry, but it's not his main strength of his game, of course.
He will come off the back fence. You will see him, he will add.
Oh yeah, he'll carry. He's not afraid to carry, absolutely not. But I'm saying, in terms of like physical stature, Aki is a bigger lump. I think when Owen comes on, what he can add that maybe Bundee doesn't have is that tactical kicking game and, the ability to probably distribute a number of ways. So whether that's short kicking game, whether that's long passing and things like that. So Aki probably doesn't have, like, let's say, necessarily the kicking game in him, the short and long kicking game, or the sort of distance distribution that Owen would have. The other thing as well is with Owen is his ability to see the game and communicate. So get out the back of shape, communicate, in terms of if the Lions are maybe in this sort of patch where, let's say they were last week, where they're not quite firing, they're under the back foot the last 20 minutes, they're giving away penalties. There's someone like Owen that will be able to recognise this and bring structure back into the game and bring some sort of authority out there to get the Lions back to where they need to go. And that could be various different ways. That could be managing the game in a way of kicking it off, going to set piece battles, could be a way of managing the game and being more direct. It could be less phases, it could be more phases, but there's someone in there that's got such a vast experience and understands the game very, very well. So yeah, I look forward to seeing him unleashed off the bench and sort of really managing and sort of adding for that last sort of 20 minutes. That's the back line covered off, Coley. Let's talk about the forwards. So Joe McCarthy's injured, so Ches comes into the second row. What does that give the Lions differently to what we saw last week?
It's quite interesting. I think Ches brings explosive carry power. You watch Ches, he's one of he can catch a ball almost standing still, and within 2 steps, he can be at max velocity. He can level change. He can change direction. And you've seen him come on throughout this tour. Even when he starts, he carries the ball. I think it's quite interesting. Genji and Andrew Porter swapping roles, and part of me thinks that might be due to McCarthy's injury and the fact that McCarthy is such a workhorse. You see him, he will carry, but he'll clear breakdowns. He tackles, he jackals, he disrupts breakdowns. He's just constantly busy. And I think Ches is probably not as busy, but gives you more explosive plays in ball carry. Whereas Genji, if you think about it, is also probably explosively a ball carrier, where Porter's more of he can ball carry, but, he offers defence, breakdown. He's got such an incredible work rate, Porter. So it's almost like those two selections have almost swapped roles in regards to, you're almost replacing Genji's ball carry with Chessum's ball carry and McCarthy's work rate with Andrew Porter's work rate. So, you're keeping the balance of the pack the same in some regards. in regards to who's carrying, who's clearing breakdowns, who's doing the sort of dirty work, so to speak. And also it might be the fact that you have we said about James Ryan now comes onto the bench, and we said midweek how he's a destroyer of breakdowns. He's going to add work rate for the latter half of the game, and that allows you to have on, say, a Genji that can come on. He's going to be frothing at the mouth, steaming at the ears, and he can come on and he will carry like nobody's business for the final 25, 30 minutes of the game, you know what I mean? So like it sort of balances out your pack in regards to the front end of the game. You can carry and do what you need to do, and back end of the game, you've still got that work rate. And I think like with Genji being on the bench, it also might just tweak a bit more out of that bench in regards to, we said about probably didn't have the impact they wanted last week, whereas like Genji comes on, we've seen him sort of talk. He's a leader for the England team, he's a leader of the Lions, you've seen him talk. Like if Genji comes on and carries and is firing, then you might find the rest of the bench follow his lead, and it offers more, potentially you get more out of the bench than you did before. Plus they probably had the rocket of them all week, or they've been prodded all week by the coaches saying we need more off the bench. So yeah, those two selections I think is, one's enforced, but I think that's maybe had a knock-on effect elsewhere in the pack.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when I look at it, I thought, well, actually, if you don't put Genji on the bench, for instance, you start looking at that forward pack to come on, and other than Jac Morgan, who isn't an out-and-out carrier, he is your typical 7 of anywhere the ball is, he's there. Whether that's jackling, whether that's tackling, whether that's sort of link play, clearing rucks and everything like that. James Ryan, like we said, on when we saw him play on Tuesday, the ruck destroyer. So he's going to go out there and just knuckle down in terms of what he does and bring that physicality around the breakdown area. And then you start looking, you're thinking, well, actually, you need someone to come on that's going to bring that carry and bring that punch. Well, Genji's your perfect man for that. So it complements what they've picked on the bench to have a ball carrier, given the enforced change with Joe McCarthy being out, Chessum going in. Last week they had Ollie Chessum that could come on carry, as you mentioned, Cody, a Ben Earl that could come on and carry. But, this week they've probably had to tinker that a little bit. So, I look forward to, like you said, Cody, I look forward to seeing Genji in that first carry, mate. He'll be sitting there getting himself wound up, ready to go. Jac Morgan, Coley, involved. Great to see him involved. Having a Welsh player involved in the matchday 23, I think is really important. But so deserving of it. There was so much speculation about whether he'd be involved in the first test and where that would sit. But I'm really delighted to see him actually involved in the matchday 23 and get an opportunity to go out of the weekend, because I think he's had a great tour. And he's someone that will be trying to be as big as nuisance to Australia's attacking breakdown as possible.
I agree. It's great to see him out there. You feel a little bit of Ben Earl. But again, part of me thinks this might be due to McCarthy's injury in some regards, because last week you had Chessum on the bench who could cover 6 and 5 if Tygber went off, or McCarthy going to the row and stuff like that. Whereas like Ben Earl is a carrier, more of a sort of 8-7 than he's a 6, I would suggest. I know Curry can shift over to 6 and stuff, but I think Jac Morgan probably offers you more. He's probably one of the most well-rounded back rowers, I think, on this tour. He's played, he can sort of do the line-out bits, he can carry, he can jackal, he's, whereas say Ben Earl is probably, yes, he can defend, but he's out-and-out carry in some regards, a bit like Pollock. They're sort of offensive players, when Morgan probably offers you that more rounded role, which is why, again, potentially losing Joe McCarthy, you bring on a Jac Morgan onto the bench, because he can do everything, especially if we don't have the 5-6 cover, which we had last week with Chessum. But it's great for him. It's great for Wales. And, he's thoroughly deserved. I think he's been outstanding on the tour so far. And it was interesting him coming off at 50 in the midweek game. So maybe that, again, you could tell we could foresee that might have happened.
Yeah, you could see that they were planning for something. I think all in all, I look at that Lions team, and I think it's extremely strong, and I think it's a team that is more than capable of getting the job done on Saturday. I think it's got the power within the forwards for the starting 8. You've got the guys that can come on and add, and I think they'll want more add than they had the week before. I think the half-back pairing is excellent. I think it's chalk and cheese when I compare it to the Aussie halfbacks and what they have in display. The centres, I think, yes, it's a little bit untested, but I'm not concerned. I think Hugh Jones has been in fine form. I think Bundee will really add that sort of power, and say with Tuipulotu dropping out or being unavailable slightly with a tight hamstring, I think Bundee, you don't lose anything with him going in there. And, I think the back three will be hungry to put out a display that sort of really reflects them as players. So all in all, mate, I look at Lions team and I look at the Australian team, I think Australia have bolstered up a little bit, but it's nothing that the Lions can't deal with. So I really want this to be a spectacle at the MCG on Saturday. And I look at that team and I think, yeah, go on, boys. You can get the job done on Saturday.
100,000 people at the MCG. I think it's going to be a fantastic... It sets it up for a fantastic second test. I think Australia hopefully are more cohesive than they were last week. I say a bit more power up front. They can maybe get across the gain line and dent the lines in that regard, which allows them to play, which we didn't really see last week. And the Lions have had a couple of enforced changes, but there's such quality in that squad and such depth that they can play sort of a variety of ways in some regards. And I think that it sets up for, if Australia can continue the momentum of potentially the second half and the Lions can start with what they had at the beginning of the test match last week, it could be a fantastic game. And I'm definitely looking forward to it.
I can't wait, mate. I'm backing the Lions, but let's hope the game lives up to the expectation and, it catches the imagination of the Australian public. And everyone over here is absolutely captivated by it. So come on the Lions. We'll be back straight after the test match, won't we, Coley?
Yes, we'll be back Saturday afternoon with our reaction to the test match. So hopefully we will see and be heard by people then.
See you then. Thanks for listening.
For the love of rugby.
If you want to drop us a line, get involved with our socials.
Just search for @loveofrugby. And if you've listened to all our episodes and need another podcast, go and find Joe Marler's Things People Do.
See you next time.